find me in the spot where the floppies be. Till I give it a read, keep it crisp in the sleeve. Every Tuesday night feels like Christmas Eve. Living between Wednesdays.
What's up, folks? I'm your host, Konrad, on Wednesday Night Reviews, and tonight I'm joined by Keith, and we're going to talk about Keith's upcoming work and comics in general. Keith, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. So, first, easy question. Some people think it's easy, some people think it's hard. But for the folks out there who have maybe never seen your face, never heard your name, or seen any of your work, who is Keith Grachow? And do tell me if I'm saying that wrong.
Grachow. It was good, though. Yeah. So that's you asked me that question in the interview email, and my response is kind of like, I'm still trying to figure out who that person is every day. But I do see the value in asking the audience, or telling the audience who I am a little bit more specifically. So I'm a illustrator professionally. I do this for a living. I've been doing this for a living over 10 years. I've been a graphic artist for like 30 years, having worked in like the toy industry and animation, other commercial endeavors, so you may have seen me at comic book shows or book signings, and I'm mostly indie when it comes to the comic books I've created, and yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. I do want to ask, because you mentioned like you've done animation and stuff. So, how long have you been making comics? And like as you mentioned, it's sort of that's your job. But are you like comics full time, or is it you do graphic design, animation, and other stuff? Like, where's your time sort of divided?
Let me back up a little bit in regards to where I came from. So I've been doing graphic arts, as I said, for about 30 years. Professionally, maybe a bit longer. My parents used to own a advertising agency. So when I was a kid, I drew a cover for one of their magazines. So I was 13. Oh. So that's my first professional work. But I started working consistently.
Good catch.
A little malfunction there. I started working consistently as a graphic artist probably when I was in college, and I was in college for graphic design and fine arts. So that was things like doing posters, doing card design. Sometimes I do concept work. One of the cool things I did when I was first starting out was I was hired by this club owner to paint, first do the concept art and also do actual art within this club. And it was like a sci-fi themed club. I think it was called like Johnny Atomic or something like that. So
cool.
Yeah, that was a really cool experience. And then I've over the years I've worked, as I said, I worked in the toy industry. I worked in animation. But about 20 years ago, I decided that I didn't really want to do graphic design as a full-time thing anymore. I wanted to focus more on illustration, and more specifically comic book art. And it took me about 8 years, I think, of just putting a portfolio together, going to shows, going back to school, till I finally started getting work, paid work as a comic book artist. And that was 2010. Concurrently, my wife and I owned a wedding photography company, and we had the ability, because of me being an artist, to offer our clients, if they wanted to have their likenesses illustrated for special unique gifts. So I would one of the first ones I did was this couple who, the guy, during the engagement session that my wife was taking photos, he had a Wonder Woman comic with him, and he's like, "Can you pose this like this?" And my wife's like, "Yeah, but my husband can actually draw you like that." And so I ended up drawing him as Batman and his wife as Wonder Woman. So
That's so
I do
cool.
that thing too. Yeah, it was a really cool experience to be able to be part of people's lives in that way. So I still do that too. I still do what I call personalized illustrations, or sometimes I'll do branding illustration, but I'm mainly doing like comic books, graphic novels, children's books, things that are story oriented.
Fascinating. Okay. I have a number of questions that have popped up, but I want to make sure, sort of fairly early on in this, we get this out there. So before we go back to what's popped into my head now, when it comes to your work with comics, what are you currently working on?
So I usually do more than one project. It just I like variety. Right now I'm working on, it's a prose slash graphic novel. It's like a hybrid, um, and it's with my mom. We've worked together before on
Oh,
children's books and chapter book, and this is something new that we haven't worked on before. This is actually loosely based off of her life. Um, and it's about this girl that during the summer of 1965 is living in a bungalow colony, and she's going through a lot of hardship and makes a new friend, and there's a mystery that starts to unravel around this new friend. So um, we're in the scripting stages, and I'm starting to do some of the art for it right now. It's been a years long process. I mean, this is like full on, uh, maybe 200 to 300 page
ooh,
graphic novel prose book, right? So um, it's quite labor intensive, but I mean, it's been amazing to work on. It's something I haven't really done before. A lot of writing, and then creating like a book that is not quite just prose and not quite a graphic novel. So there's a lot of logistic issues, problem solving, that we're going through. So I work on that. I work on. I just wrapped up something with my partner in crime, Mitch Cook, called Sasquatch: A Refugee's Story, which is going to actually premiere at TCAF in a couple of weeks. Um, and I will be picking up the books tomorrow.
oh
Um,
wow.
so he's already seen his, but I have to pick mine up. And then I think we'll probably talk about this, but one of the things that I've always been a collaborator. I've always had somebody to work with, and I've really wanted to see what I can do solo, to see what I can do just being the person that is the sole visionary of a project.
Hmm.
And it's just more. I've started working on this project called Bounty Hunter Kai, um, just to see what I can do, and it's been immensely fun. I get to just go in the direction I want to go in. I don't really actually know how it ends. I don't really know where it's going exactly. I'm kind of plotting it out chapter by chapter, which is really fun because usually I like want to know like what the whole story is.
Okay.
So it's for me, it's like problem solving at much more of like a high paced or intense way, because it's like you're not knowing where the story's going to go. You have to make sure what you've created before works for what you're creating currently. So I'm constantly like making sure there's no plot holes and all that kind of stuff. And I'm as I'm writing, I'm thumbnailing it out. So it's a little different for my process, because usually I get a script first and
Yeah.
then thumbnail it. This is like kind of very organic. So I've been working on that. Then I will be starting up on this ongoing series I've been working on for the last few years, issue number 4 for a book called Donnybrook. So that starts in May. Um, and then I have some other projects that are in various stages, that pitches and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Donnybrook. Yeah, exactly. So number 4 begins production early May.
Fantastic. I was literally, I was going through all your books. Like, I've got a stack of the books that you've been the sole artist on, such as Martian's here. I've got Stillwater, which is fantastic.
Saltwater,
Again,
yeah.
or Saltwater, yes.
Yeah, it's another book. Stillwater's another book, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And then you actually did a small part for this as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's great to hear because, oh, man, so many questions. I guess, one, how do you keep all of that like straight in your head? Because, like you said, you've got Donnybrook Book 4, the graphic novel prose book. For the folks out there, prose just means like a regular word book. And then you've got all of this other stuff you're doing. How do you keep that all straight?
Yeah. Well, I think that it's taken me years to kind of get to a point where I can compartmentalize different worlds that I'm creating. Some of them involve or require much more reference and much more research. Some of them, because I've been involved with them for years, like Donnybrook, I know the characters really well. I kind of know how they're going to move and behave, and I've done a lot of the research already in regards to the way that the plays are going to play out and all that kind of stuff, or the gear they're wearing. So for me to do like something like Donnybrook and something else, I can compartmentalize it because it's also I think it's like watching, for me, it's like if you're watching multiple TV shows or movies. It's like you can jump into one and then you can jump into like Star Wars, and then you can jump into like The Last of Us or something like that. And it's not like you're confused as to what you're watching. It just, maybe it takes a little switch in your brain to kind of go, oh, that's right, these are the characters I'm watching, and this is the world I'm in. And I'm always kind of, for me, I think my personality lends to variety. Because one of your questions is the way that some of my work is very, I guess it's varied from book to book. And we can talk about like the process if you like.
Absolutely. Just for the folks out there, I'm just going to show a couple examples. Because what I noticed is, so for Donnybrook, this is sort of the art style. I'm trying to show some panels that aren't going to give anything major away and let the camera focus for a second. But that's sort of the art style of Donnybrook. And then, what's another?
Mark Twain's Niagara would have a very different look to it.
Actually, you know what? That's a great one. Mark Twain, and I believe it's page 28. You start. Yep, there's your signature. So then we've got Mark Twain's Niagara, which looks like so. And then I'll put up Saltwater, because I think this is just a damn good book. And then we've got Saltwater. So what I found when I was reading through all these different books is the level of detail you choose. Like in Saltwater, I found a lot of people, especially younger people, their faces were there wasn't a lot of detail that went into it, just because they wouldn't have any blemishes, they wouldn't have wrinkles and stuff. And yet someone who would be of similar age, say in Donnybrook, they might have all sorts of hatching to just give depth and shadow and characteristics. And I notice in some of the Concrete Martians books too, you made use of a lot of cross hatching and things like that, even though it's a colored book. So I found that you were using a lot of different techniques in a lot of interesting ways. So yeah, like, how do you decide what techniques you're going to use when? And I suppose, does that come from your art training or your design training?
Well, I mean, I can answer the second one faster. Both. I mean, the art and design are kind of intertwined. I mean, the is concept. It's composition and light and dark, and perspective and design, composition, light and dark. I mean, it's all very much similar, just using different tools in different ways. For the first part of it, so it's kind of like a multi-pronged answer, because part of it is the things you're talking about were done in different time periods, right? So Concrete Martians is like a decade old. And where I was a decade ago trying to figure things out is very different from where I am today. So all the skills and tools that I've learned since working on Concrete Martians, I've changed as a human being. I've changed as an artist. So when I work on a project like Donnybrook versus, let's say, Saltwater, well, right now Donnybrook is black and white. Dom, the writer, would like to make it color at some point, but because I'm the one doing the art for this, the decisions I make with black and white would be very different than if I'm the one going from like pencils to color. And so the person who's going to do the color for Donnybrook will they'll add their artistry to it, and it'll look, hopefully, more than not. It'll be something different from what I create on my own. But when I do something with color, I may do something different. I make different decisions in my workflow. So that kind of takes care of, the difference between color and something black white. And then when I'm working on multiple projects, the story dictates what I need to be doing. So, for example, I don't know if you have that book, Checkmate Blues.
Not yet.
Okay, so Checkmate Blues was created in a way where I'm using monotone in a very specific way, and partly that came out because of the writer wanted to, Robert Evaniuk, he was not necessarily wanting it to be in color, but he liked the idea, like full color, but he liked the idea of some kind of color. And then I thought also the story, because of the time period, kind of lent to doing something with like a very monotone like color to it. So I wanted to experiment and try something that I felt would uniquely work with this book. Whereas I wouldn't necessarily make that decision with Saltwater or even Summer on the Swing is the book I'm working on with my mom. It's a very different type of book, different type of story. And that's going to tell me the type of process I might use for that. And then finally, the last prong is I get bored.
Fair.
Like well, let me explain. By when bored, I mean like when I'm working through a project, a page, it's problem solving for me. It's putting pieces of the puzzle together. And once I kind of figure it out, if it's like trying to figure out, I don't know, part of a new process I'm trying to work on, where maybe I'm being more efficient in how I'm doing thumbnails, or whether I'm just trying to figure out a way to render something differently or a different kind of composition. Once I've kind of figured it out and felt like, okay, I did a really good job with this. If I keep on, if it's a very similar type of thing where there's a lot of talking going on, and I've figured out some really interesting angles with that. If I have to keep on repeating some of that kind of stuff, I get kind of like I just feel a little stagnant. So I want to be able to constantly try to figure new things out, and that's what I'll do. If I know like a story is going to be in a similar location throughout the whole story, and it's going to be a lot of talking. I've done stories where there's that kind of thing. So I want to make sure if I'm going into it, there's something else that's going to um, kind of tickle my brain, because the what anybody reading, like a story where somebody is, or reading a comic where two people are talking, over 4 or 5 pages, you have to keep them engaged. You have to try to figure out ways that it's not just the same thing from panel to panel. I mean, it can be, there are artists who will repeat that because that's what they need to do, but there may be a different angle you're coming at, that drawing a person from an angle that you haven't really drawn before, or it's a more difficult angle to draw them at, or maybe even trying something completely different where either people are in the panel anymore. You're like focusing on like a phone, or so there's ways.
Yeah.
So stuff like that. I'm always looking for ways to challenge myself in a project, and that's why one project may be very different from another, because I'm challenging myself with a different composition, or different brush, or different whatever. The difficulty for me is, if I'm doing a series, is trying not to like change from issue to issue too much. Like, I'm always experimenting a little bit, but as long as it looks consistent from issue to issue, I'm okay. Like pushing things a little bit, but I also have to be careful. So with Saltwater, I the first issue to the second, there was probably a bit of or maybe the second to third, there was a bit of like a change in regards to my workflow, so that I don't think it looks very different, but the way I was working was different. And then between issue number 3 and issue 4, same thing, like a difference in workflow. So, but because issue 4 was a totally different story, I was able to kind of push things a little bit more visually with like the colors and stuff. So it's a little bit more black heavy, a little bit more spotted blacks in issue number 4, but the story kind of lent itself to that. So, but I have to also just kind of be aware I can't go like absolutely crazy in regards to like changing the whole style, unless it's what the story dictates. I have to keep a consistency. It's the same thing with Donnybrook. I have to, although from issue 1 to issue 2, I for sure changed things up a bit more. And I asked the writer if that was okay, and he was fine with it. And so cool. From issue 2 to 4, it'll be pretty. I mean, between issue 1 and 2, it's pretty consistent. I don't think most people would notice. I know that I noticed a little bit, but if another artist would notice. But like, I think like the casual reader is just going to read it and may not see that there's a huge difference. But between issues 2 and 4, the process is pretty consistent. So again, it's just there's always multiple things happening as to why I have different style. I don't even call them styles, just different processes with the story, so that it may have just visually look a little bit different from something else.
Yeah, I mean, like one thing that from reading the books of yours that I have, and now speaking with you, which is like the coolest thing I get to do, given your educational background and how long you've been doing this, I think it's interesting that you, like you said, you don't really say it's a style, it's just the process you're using. I definitely feel like then Saltwater, maybe I'm wrong, so feel free to chime in on this one, but I feel like with Saltwater, it might have been advantageous for you because how it jumps around in time in the story from the 1940s to the 50s to 2005. Yeah. So you get to play a lot with, well, what color, right? Because if it's like black and white, like the 40s would have been in film, I could do black and white palettes. Mm-hmm. The 50s, it was like more sepia, I think is the term for it, but like the beiges and brown tones, and the 2005's updated colored and all that fun stuff. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's really interesting. And I also like the fact that you said you use just different processes. So I guess, so I'm going to ask the question that came up in my head earlier before I lose it. So given that you did design and then later went back for art, and that was the steps, correct? You went for design first and then went back to education for art? Like,
not quite. I actually, when you go to school for art, they give you the basics, which is painting and color theory and all that kind of stuff. And then you get into more specific aspects of whatever your degree is going to be. So it was design. When I went back to school, it was actually similar. It was basics again, and then specific comic book aspects of comic books, right?
Oh, cool.
So yeah, both times same process. It's just the first time was more in the design realm, and the second time was more in the comic book realm.
Okay, so thank you for clearing that up. So the question I have then, and I feel like you're going to be able to very specifically answer this, is a lot of folks that I've talked to who make their own comics, and some of them are up on this wall, they always start as graphic designers and stuff, and then like, you know what, I want to do something more creative, and they happen to like comics, so they're like, well, I'll just make a comic. For those out there that are maybe listening who are currently graphic designers or starting to study graphic design, or maybe they're finishing their BAs and stuff, what would you say is functionally the difference between graphic design and illustration or cartooning for comics?
Well, I mean, both of them are commercial arts. You're going to be, I mean, I think they're similar in that if you're doing graphic design, you could be doing it solo, as in regards to like you're doing everything from, with the exception of maybe like the content, what's being written, you may be doing all the design and laying in of the text and stuff. And you know, same thing with comic books. You're part of a team where, you know, somebody's giving you the text, and potentially the writer is giving you the script, and you're, you know, creating the design of the book, you know, through panels and stuff like that. So there's a lot of similarities. What may differ is how people are paid in the industries. Like comic book, you know, there's a page rate, whereas graphic design, you may charge for the project. You know, it just, and also you're going to get paid a different amount with graphic design. It's also nowadays graphic design is heavily wrapped up with web design and things of that nature. So you may be wearing more hats, because if you're just doing design, you may also be doing some kind of social media, and you know, there's all different aspects of that could be different than comic book creator. But I mean, it's very similar. But I don't know if I don't know if a lot of graphic designers start graphic designers and then end up as comic book artists. I don't know. Maybe at some point that was the case. I don't have any information to say whether or not people who are like in school, in high school, or you know, they want to be a comic book artist, but they become a graphic designer instead, which was what happened to me. I think nowadays you may have a lot more comic book artists that just end up being comic book artists, and that may have been the case as well back when I was in school. Where it's just, for me personally, the idea of being a comic book artist, when I was a teenager, I wanted to do it, but I didn't have enough confidence in myself or confidence and determination and endurance and stuff to be able to do what it would require to be a comic book artist. It took me years to kind of get there, but I felt graphic design was a little bit of an easier thing for me to get into because of my parents having an advertising agency. So I understood the nuts and bolts of, like, you know, what printing and things like that. I understood, you know, how that worked. That world was more familiar as in a business standpoint, whereas comic books was, you know, there was no internet at that point. The internet was, you know, in its infancy. So I didn't have the ability to like look up certain things or connect certain ways to people. And I did graphic design professionally for about a decade, but I really, like, at the whole time I was like, but I really want to do comic books. And I just kept on, like, in my mind, I was just like, I'll get there. And then you make excuses, you know, you keep on pushing it back. And then finally I just decide, I'm like, why don't I just do this? And I kind of just dropped the whole graphic design part and just focused completely on comic books, as I said, about 22 years ago now. And I knew that I would still use graphic design within whatever I was doing. I mean, I still, because I do a lot of my books or with somebody, or it's an indie endeavor, which means that your business as well as the person putting the book together and stuff. So, I would draw the thing and then have to figure out how to put it together. And because I'd already had that skill set from the graphic design days, it was a huge stretch for me to be able to how to do the pre-press of a comic book. And I mean, I don't know if all comic book creators have that skill. I know a lot of them don't know that once they've created it, they're like, no, what do we do? How does it get into creation? And it's like, well, you have to be able to send it to the printer in a certain format. How do you put, what do you put inside the book where you have like the legal and, where you have
I never thought of that.
Interpage, you have, you may have a 20 page comic book with 20 interior pages, but you actually have 24 pages. You're right. Yeah, so the front cover, the back cover, the interior front, the interior back still have to have something there potentially. So so you have to know how to do all that kind of stuff. So that's really where I use my graphic design skill sets for doing this. But if somebody wanted me to just purely do something with graphic design, I tell them, unless I can do some drawing, I don't really have an interest in like doing something where it's just putting a bunch of shapes together with text. I want to draw something.
Cool. And clearly, I mean, you've been at this for quite some time. You've got a number of books out, so you can easily be picky and just do what you want to do. What to ask? You know what? With Saltwater, with Concrete Martians, you worked with the same writer, Mitch Cook. So I wanted to ask, how did that partnership start? As I understand it, Mitch is from the States. I don't remember the state off the top of my head. But yeah, did you guys meet in school? Was it over the internet?
So he's out of Washington State. And just as a little piece of information, Concrete Martians, that two-part story that you showed earlier, Concrete is actually about a town in Washington State. So there's a town called Concrete. Yeah. So there's a town called Concrete in Washington State that that book is based off of. So Mitch and I, we met in Japan, 2005. I was a TESOL teacher with my wife, then girlfriend, and we met him. It was called the Multimedia Center, it's what we're doing right now. Which before we had Zoom and Meet and all that kind of stuff, you basically had video-to-video conferencing, and we were at the school that had your choice. You can either go to like a satellite school where you teach people in person, or usually kids, or you can do like multimedia, which would be teaching people of all ages all over Japan. And they would take couples who they requested it, they would put them in the multimedia because you'd be able to work together. Whereas if they were to put you at a satellite, you may get, I may go to, Tokyo, and my wife would go to Okinawa, and so we would see each other.
Yeah.
So they put us in together in this, it's called the Multimedia Center, and Mitch worked there. He came in a year after we did. I think it was about a year, and I can't really explain why at the time I was really antisocial, but I put that on my email. But it's not that I'm an antisocial person, but I was like, when I decided 22 years ago that I wanted to get into comic books, I started to realize that like I needed to just really focus on drawing all the time, and something I hadn't really done before. I'd always I would start like a lot of us out there who probably start drawing, and then they stop, because they get frustrated with what they're working on, and then they don't draw for like a day or two or a week or months or whatever. That would be me earlier on in my career as a graphic artist. And so one of the things I decided to do when I decided to get into comic books is like, I'm going to draw every day. I'm going to draw life all the time. And when I went to Japan, I'm like, this is a perfect opportunity for me to draw people that I would never see there. And like Japan is a isolationist country, so a lot of culture is locked from the way it was hundreds of years ago, right?
Yeah.
So I just thought that it would be a great opportunity for me to be able to just draw some really interesting things I'd never seen before. And so to do that, I just had to focus, and I compartmentalized. Like I was like, okay, I'm not going to talk to anybody at this center. I'm just going to like draw when I'm not working. And sometimes I would draw while I was working because they can't see, technically if I wanted to, I could be drawing right now as I'm talking to you. Right. But that's what I would do. I would just draw people as they're talking to me. And that's all I did for the 2.5 years I was there pretty much. And so most people kind of left me alone. I don't know if they knew what to make of me. They would, you're an artist, you can draw. I'm like, yep. And then I would keep on drawing and just ignore them. And that, for most part, people are like, okay, fine, he's an ass, and just walk away. Mitch was persistent. He'd be like, so what are you drawing? I'm like, people. And why are you drawing those people? And you just keep on asking. And finally be like, okay, you're not going to shut up, are you? And then you go, as a matter of fact, I'm not. And I had this idea for a comic book. And so he would, start to, I mean, it didn't quite happen exactly like that, but it was essentially, he had this, some story ideas that because he's a writer and a TV person and a radio person. And so he's a real student of like cinema and media. And so he wanted to try comic books, and he, presented me with some story ideas, and I was just like, okay, well, those are actually pretty good. Maybe I'll talk to you only, right? My wife and you. And so we started working on this vampire story that never came to any fruition. I mean, I did a bunch of pages, and we used it as a pitch to like try to get published and stuff. But finally we kind of decided, well, maybe we should just do our own thing and not worry about finding a publisher to pick up the story. And I think by that time, Mitch, he didn't, you kind of, this is over a period of like 4 or 5 years, this is after Japan, when we're still in touch talking about doing comics. And, he would be working, noodling around with the story we had started with. And, I guess he was like, I don't know if this is working. I'll put it aside and try something new. And he came upon Concrete Martians, which was it's based off of a real story of a town in Concrete, Washington State, during 1938, when they were like the rest of America was listening to the War of the Worlds radio broadcast. That Orson Welles was the voice of and narrating. And so
did he actually voice it?
Yeah, I think that was Orson, not H.G. Wells, Orson Welles, the actor, right? He did. Yeah. H.G. Wells was no relation. Was the author of the War of the Worlds, which came out years 80, late 19th century, maybe.
Yeah, it's one of the early ones. Yeah,
sci-fi stories. Yeah. So anyway, so it's a real story that he was working at a Como news station, radio station, and he came across this article about the town. And he's like, oh, this would be a great comic book. And so he pitched me on it. I'm like, yeah, I like anything historical, and I like doing research on things, and it's sci-fi too. So we created this two-part story that kind of launched everything else after that, because for whatever reason, Martian seems to be a theme with our books for the most part. Not everything,
Yeah.
but so we kind of became known as the Mars guys, right? So with Saltwater being the spiritual successor to Concrete Martians, it's a Martian story. It takes place in colony of Mars, and then we've done like a kids comic called Bingo, Invades the Zoo, which is it's a kid Martian, right? So. Most of what we've done, it's not everything we've done. We've actually, the latest thing we've done has nothing to do with Martians, but so Mitch and I have been working together now. It's 18 years. It's almost 20 years, really.
Okay.
Yeah. So and if anything, we're increasing production of what we're doing, because he I think he gets immense gratification out of seeing stories in his head become visuals, and something a lot of times he's like, what I imagine exactly what you drew, and so I think he loves that aspect of it. We work really well together. We've got like a shorthand of the way we communicate
cool.
with each other. So it's a real like we know where we want to go in regards to challenging ourselves creatively. So that's always pretty gratifying.
That's cool. Like one thing, and for the folks out there, absolutely, the two issues of Concrete Martians and currently out are actually, I believe you have 4 issues of Saltwater out. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, I need to get number 4. From firsthand experience from the first 3 issues, they are just damn spooky. What I like about it, personally, what I like about it. So one, obviously, the War of the Worlds story with Concrete Martians that you're telling, where you're showing kind of what happened to the States and the panic that ensued from the story, which really did happen, and it was just interesting that it happened. Wells wrote a good story. And of course, it was acted out very well. But with Saltwater, you've taken the thing, the both of you have taken the thing that makes that creepy and just amplified it. So for the folks out there, Saltwater is basically a story where it focuses on humans that migrate to Mars to colonize it, and some time ago, because they're there for, it's like 40 years, right? When we're in modern time?
Yeah, I think it's more like 55 years, yeah.
55 years. So there's literally generations of people on Mars.
Yeah.
But like fairly early on in that scale, they lose contact with Earth. And then stuff starts happening. And the idea of the horror being they can only get select information. So what they can get, can they trust it? Is it real? Mm-hmm. How do you identify? How do you confirm? That kind of idea just scares the crap out of me. And the way that the way that you put Saltwater together, it's spooky. Without being like graphically what I would consider like a horror book, right? Like this is bright and colorful, and you've made Mars like cool to look at. You've made the station interesting. Their uniforms are cool, but like it's a spooky book.
And I think issue 4 amplifies that even more. Like just talking about the use of color and stuff like that. We really dig into that with issue number 4, and I think I like what you're saying about spooky, because it's a closed space, right? And I think that's the thing that probably adds that element, is because really at any time, I mean, they're essentially in this box that's surrounded by like no atmosphere that they can't breathe. So if anything happens, and they haven't had the ability, because they're cut off from the Earth, they really haven't been able to resupply. So they're reusing what they have and trying to make sure that they're keeping up on keeping safe. But of course, things are going to start to fail, and there's I don't want to give anything away with issue number 4, but they start to explore some of the space that we haven't seen yet. So,
well, that's exciting.
And, so it's and I think that's kind of it's just this. it's expanding, but it's also not. Like it's still there's still things that the characters that are Meg, the main character, who initially discovered the Earth was still there. She's like discovering more and more these things that have been hidden from her, and and so for her, it's just like all these people that you've trusted over the years have been lying, right?
Yeah, and I think spooky is the best word, because there's something like in a classic horror where you have like a monster out there that's going to get you, or like a zombie, right? It's a very clear, identifiable, that's the bad guy. But like when you can't trust the information you've been given, you can't verify it, like that's just
I love it.
Yeah, exactly. So we've talked up salt water. For the folks out there, important thing to ask, Keith, how can people currently get your books? What's the best way?
Yeah, and that, unfortunately, I don't have like an easy answer for that, because I work with different creators that have different ways they distribute their books. So, for example, Mitch and I, we have Kikamika Comics, which is our publishing brand, I guess, the publishing house. So you can actually go to kikamikacomics.com and buy books from anything that Mitch and I have done together, or you can get them from me. You can go to my website, it's Grachow.com. Same thing with my children's books, or anything I've done with my mom, or anything I've done solo, which isn't a huge amount of things at this point, but like that Bounty Hunter Kai will probably be something you'd be able to pick up, order from me, or pick up. But when it comes to like Donnybrook, you'd have to go to Mess Bucket Comics to get any of the issues. Same thing with like I have something in Toronto Comics, and you have to order through them. AH Comics, same thing. So otherwise, if you see me at a show, you can purchase them from me directly, and I can sign them for you and give you a little backstory in regards to the books you're looking at. Best bet is to contact me either through my website, as I mentioned, keithgrachow.com, or go to social media, Facebook or Instagram. It's just my name, Keith Grachow, and you can always message me and go, hey, how do I pick this book up? And I'll do my best to see how I can get it to you. Fortunately, some of that stuff is in digital, so if you're purely a digital reader, we don't have everything digitally. Checkmate Blues, you can get digitally from Robert Iveniuk. He's the writer on it, and he has a website. I'm not remembering what his is, so you can just contact me if you want.
I'll make sure it's up.
So that's it in regards to where you can probably find most of that stuff.
Awesome. And speaking of seeing you at a show, as mentioned earlier, you're going to be at TCAF at the end of April.
Yes.
I'm assuming you'll have some amount of some of these books, if not all of them, correct?
We'll see. I have limited table space, so I will have to be selective in what I can bring. Usually, I think this is a 3-foot space, and I normally have like a 6-foot space, so it means I'm going to have to maybe
condense a little.
Yeah, but I will have. So I'm premiering Sasquatch, a refugee story. That's the story Mitch and I are doing, and that's essentially it's an interesting one. If I can talk about that real quickly,
please. Yeah.
We wanted to do something, as I said, to challenge our skill sets. Mm-hmm. And this one, Mitch and I were talking, like, what if we do this without any real dialogue? And Mitch is like, let me see if I can do that. And so it intrigued him, because he's like, when it comes to like dialogue, he's a pretty sparse writer. Like if you looked at his scripts, it's he often has let the visuals say what that needs to be said. And I think that I've always, like that's about as much as you're going to get on a page. It's not a huge amount of dialogue. And so, but for him, this was a challenge to see if he can do it with almost like minimal. And we had to put a little bit of dialogue with sound effects and things like that. But for the most part, we just wanted to see what could be done with story visually. And it's a story that it's relevant today because it talks about, immigration and the fear people have over different people that are not, they're not like you, right? So we're dealing with something that I think a lot of people can relate to or are aware of is a hot one issue. And I think those books, it's going to be within this world that is going to have different. It's going to be different characters, but I'll have like environmental issues. It's called The Dwell. Is like the Dwell is like the world that we're creating, and within this Dwell, you're going to have like these anthropomorphic characters dealing with maybe an environment, may not be the next one, but something, some kind of topic. And I don't know exactly what the next one's going to look like, but it's just a vehicle for us to try to experiment a bit away from like saltwater, which is, it is like this horror mystery unraveling, and we now know the characters and where, have a general sense of where it's going. This is a little bit of a way for us to experiment in a different world.
Perfect. I'm hoping it scratches that itch in your brain that lets you sort of flex your creative muscles and keeps you interested.
Oh yeah, for sure. This one, I can always come back and show you once you get the book when we talk about it, because it's very different creative process I used for that book than I have for anything. Actually, it was a lot more painting involved with Sasquatch than what I normally do. So for me it was a challenge to kind of figure out how to create these different environments in a more painterly fashion.
Okay, then one thing, like we're coming near to the end of the hour, so I want to make sure I ask this then. I have a feeling that you use whatever medium you feel is best suited, but do you have like a preferred medium? Do you prefer analog or like pencil, paint, inks over digital? Is it all digital?
Mainly digital. I do traditionally draw when it comes to like if I'm designing characters or the world. I may pull my sketchbook out and start to play around with that. But mainly when I'm creating comic books from almost from the beginning to the end, it's digital. And I just something because way back when I was working as a graphic designer, I was just very familiar with Photoshop, invested a lot of time learning Photoshop. So when I decided to do the comic book, really to devote myself to comic books, I was like, well, what is the thing I feel most comfortable doing? And it's working in Photoshop. And around that time, you're getting like pressure sensitive tablets that you can use. So it just felt like a very natural progression for me to work in that way. But I'm traditionally trained, right? So I have that kind of aesthetic or that the mentality in regards to. So to what you're saying is it's hard to tell if I'm working digitally or traditionally.
Yeah, like some of the times I'm like I was confident because of maybe the colors. It was like, oh, that's got to be digital. But then the way that your lines are, I'm like, but that feels like analog. So it's kind of cool, yeah.
It's purposeful. Like I like things that feel organic and feel traditionally. That's something I would do traditionally. I try to get as it's still not digitally still can't get that traditional feel exactly, but I try to when I'm working with brushes is again my the way I think about it is it's from a traditional background, so I do try to put that aesthetic in there.
That's so cool. Well, I think you do a fantastic job at it.
Thank you.
Then yeah, you know what? We're last couple questions.
Sure.
We've kind of covered what was going to be the next one, which is what's next for you. So clearly, you're working on the book with your mother, and again, the title is
Summer on the Swing.
Summer on the Swing, which may be done next year after.
Good question.
Whenever.
Yeah, it's a big project, so it could take. And if it gets picked up by a publisher, it's whenever they decide to release it. So
Fair. And then for yourself, your own fully created project, Bounty Hunter Kai, that's on the way.
Yeah, so that probably would come out before Summer on the Swing. I'm actually the first two scripts of so each script I've done so far has been 36 pages. I have two parts so far finished in regards to the script. I've also I would say penciled the first script, and I'm in the middle of the second one right now. I'm not sure. I don't know what I'm going to do with this. If I'm going to release it as like the parts, like part one, part two, part three, or issues, whatever you want to call them. I don't know if I'm going to do like a print format. I don't know if I'm going to release it as a web comic, where maybe I will, release a page a week or something.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I'm not sure exactly what I'll do with it. I just know that for now, I just enjoy working on the process, and at some point, I just may have like a finished, like part, and go, okay, well, let's do something with it.
Yeah.
And then I haven't quite decided. So, and I also don't know if I'm going to keep on working in the way I've been working, which is scripting it out and thumbnailing it at the same time, when the thumbnails are almost looking like pencils. They're very, very detailed. And keep on doing that until I finish the story, which means I may not have anything for a couple of years, because the story is, I don't know how long the story is. I may decide just to get to a certain point and go, okay, I think I'm ready to release this into the world. And I will start inking and coloring and lettering the thing. I don't know. I'm not sure what I want to do, but it's progressing pretty quickly. So it's very possible
Nice.
I may have that first part done by the end of the year.
Well, I wish you the best of luck on it. Clearly you're enjoying it, which is like the important
Yeah,
part.
and that's the main part for me. Yeah.
Awesome. Then you know what? Second last question. Normally, Keith, the people who create comics are themselves in some way nerdy. They either, like yourself, like comics, maybe it's board games, cards, whatever it is. What would you say for you is the key piece to your collection? Maybe not the most expensive thing, not the most rare thing, but the thing that, when you sit down and look at whatever it is that you enjoy, that one thing that's like, that's the thing that makes me happy. What is that for you?
So I've recently restarted my back issue collection. And we've talked
Ooh.
about this a little bit. So during the pandemic, my comic book collection was in disarray. Like it was not in order, and I had no idea what I had, and I hadn't like organized or anything. And so I was like, well, this is the time to do it during the pandemic. And
Yep.
I started to get it in order, and realized that I had, like, for whatever reason, holes in my collection from like, when I started in the 80s. I had stopped for a year or two, and never filled in
Okay.
those issues. And I was like, I really would like to reread this as a complete thing, at least I wouldn't necessarily, have issue number one of like an X-Men, but I can always get like, if I have like a nice run of X-Men comics, I can at least read through all those. But I want to be able to I don't want to have any issues missing in that run. So I've been like filling in back issues for the last year or so, and it's a lot of fun, because I make sure that I can't spend too much money on each issue. Right, I obviously can get very expensive, so I'm not so concerned with, like, doesn't have to be the highest quality, but it's the hunt. I just like looking for them, getting a good deal on them, and then being able to say, okay, now I've completed this run on this book, and move on to something else. And so that's something I look forward to. It's I don't know if other people like daydream about, like, oh, I wonder if I'm going to get these issues in this next show, right? But that's me. I'll I'll go, I wonder if I'll find this key issue that I've been looking for, and I wonder if I'll be able to get it at a reasonable price. And I don't know, that excites me.
Nice.
So yeah, that's the thing that gives me joy.
The
One of the
hunt.
things that gives me joy.
Yeah.
The hunt. Yeah.
I love it. No, you know what? That is, it's one of the things that I don't know if modern comic book readers will understand. Like even for myself, right? Like I started reading comics in 2011 with the New 52 from DC, and pretty well I've been super consistent. I pick up my books every week or every other week, so I haven't had any gaps in my current stuff. And for the older stuff, for me, I'll just go buy a graphic novel and the collections and all that. But what I did do very intentionally was, because I like The Rocketeer, so I went out and I hunted down that series. Because there's not a lot to it. So if you're out there, if you're out there as a comic enthusiast and you don't know what to start collecting, The Rocketeer, short run, fairly popular. So there's a lot of it out there. So it's not hard to find. It's just, you got to find it. So yeah, the hunt is so fun.
For sure. And I mean, and everything, it's a little different, different rules for example, I've never collected the individual issues of The Walking Dead. I kind of jumped on that book when it was starting to get into the graphic novel format. And so all I do with Walking Dead is collect those small graphic novels. I don't have no plans on getting the individual issues, right? I think, but yeah, there's certain things that it's just like sometimes I'll go to like a show and I'll go, oh, there's a bunch of like what was it, the Constantine, which was like a 250 issue book run. And I have like a smattering of issues, and I've got like a bunch of the collected books, but somebody had like a whole huge run for like $1 each. And I'm going, well, I'm not going to buy it. They didn't have all of them, but they had like a good chunk of them. So I'm going, well, for $50, I can get like, 50 comics and get like a fifth of the way there or whatever. So, there's that kind of thing. I have to be careful about that, because I don't want to, I am trying to, like, at the same time I'm growing my collection, I'm also kind of going, what can I get rid of? Because it doesn't really bring me joy. I just have it because I've collected a bunch of the issues, but I don't know if I'm going to reread it, or if I reread it and I go, I'm good with it. I don't think I need to have these anymore. So, it's all that kind of stuff too. But there's just certain books like the X-Men, Spider-Man. When I was a kid, that was what I could find at either the spinner rack, or my cousin gave me a comic book, or, whatever. And that's where, so you start collecting those comics when you're a kid, and then before you know it, you've got like 100, 200, 300, or whatever of that particular run, and you're like, oh well, if I can find this issue or this issue. And so it's just, for me, it's just, I grew up in a time when individual issues were the only way, and to really buy the story, and then because they didn't really collect them back then to graphic novels or trades. And then of course, a lot of times the only access you had to get a comic book was at your 7-Eleven, because the comic book shop was, if you could find one, there was maybe one, in every, I don't know, like one every 50 miles, or maybe not even. Like, it was hard.
Yeah, they were pretty rare. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was probably when I was a teenager that I started having the ability to go a longer distance to go to comic book shops.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Then you know what? Yeah, Keith, my last question for you, super simple. Who do you think I should interview next?
Well, Mike Ruth comes to mind. Have you interviewed him yet?
I have. I had him on for a sketch duel, or not a sketch duel, like a draw and chat. And then I have interviewed him about, I think, a year ago or so now. Okay.
Yeah, so he's always somebody that I think we exchange, like, he'll do a podcast and refer me to somebody, and all. Becca Kinsey's another person. I don't know if you've. She's a great comic book creator and inspiration to me, because she's, if you like horror, she does some really dark, horrific, well done stories. And so I would recommend her. I'll recommend a couple of the writers I work with, which is Robert Deveniuk, Mark Bertolini, Connor McCreary. Mitch, I would recommend him, but he's in the West Coast, and he likes doing the podcast with me. I'm not sure he's a lot of what we would be talking. Well, I think there'd be a lot of repetition because of the story. He's really he's a comic book writer, but it's just very much what we work on together. Or he does stories outside of that, but I don't know if he would. I'm pretty certain his answer would be, "Yeah, I'll do it with you," and I'd be like, "Well, I've already done it." So,
well, you know what? Maybe what we'll do is closer to when your next book with him is coming out. I'll have you both on, and we can talk about it.
And I think that would work out well because he would be able to give you much more in-depth answers in regards to inspiration of saltwater and concrete Martians and things like that. So,
perfect.
Yeah.
Then that's what we'll do. Awesome. All right. Well, Keith, absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time tonight to come on the show.
Oh, this has been a fantastic interview. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And for the folks out there in YouTube land, hit that like button, comment down below what you thought of Keith, subscribe, and the first link at the top will be to Keith's website where you can go through, pick up the work he's got, such as Saltwater, and many other amazing books, even kids' books. And with that, we'll see you next time.
Golden age to present, digest to oversize. Never miss new comic day, yeah, no surprise. So where's my no prize? Check the letter columns. Can't find issue 2? Yeah, collector problems, cliffhangers, mysteries, you need answers. When did Batman become Green Lantern? I get it, true believer, not lying. Always up for an awesome summer crossover tie-in. High flying, full color or black and white. Splash pages, flashbacks, whet your appetite. With new costumes, team-ups, first loves, first appearances.